Hey guys, bit of a different video today. We're talking tennis. Tennis grips. There we go. I'm a big tennis fan. And I play a bit of tennis myself. And I had some thoughts on grips that I thought you might like to hear, my friend. Okay, here we go. So the first thing I'd like to point out to you is to notice with each different grip, right, ranging from a conservative to an extreme grip. So conservative being like a hammer grip, right, the way you hit a hammer, and extreme being like, I guess if you were to do that same hammer motion, it would almost fall on the opposite side. So it's like a 180 degree. So you can almost say that on the conservative side, you're hitting the ball like this, like a ping pong racket, and with the extreme grip, you're hitting the ball. You like twist your hand all the way around, and you're hitting the ball like this. And there's everything in between those two grips, notably the semi-western or semi-extreme or whatever you want to call it, where you'd be hammering, like this would be your hammer in a way. You'd go like that. And something that's worth noting is imagining that I want to hit the ball across court. If I use this hammer grip, what is the most natural position of my body for my racket to face that way? Is this making sense? I think it is. So, if I just hold out the racket like this, the most natural position for me to be in to hit the ball over there is here, facing the side. Right? That's the way the racket naturally faces that direction. By contrast, if I have a extreme grip, or what we call a Western grip, if I just stick out my hand, the racket pretty much just lands in front of me like this, if I'm facing the front. So there's one very important, distinction between them. Now, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here a little bit, so bear with me. So this is the first distinction I'd like to bring to your attention. The natural angle of your body to hit a relatively sort of conservative cross-court shot. One is an open stance and one is what we call a closed stance. So traditional closed stance, which is why in the olden days they used closed stance way more than today because of the grip. They gripped it like this. And don't get me wrong, there's still players who use a very traditional grip and who have evolved and adapted with that grip, and I will get to that in a minute. Whilst the open stance, modern stance, you just face the court and the racket pretty much faces in a favourable position where you can hit the ball conservatively cross court. Okay, so here's a second difference that we can observe within this range of strokes. What is this difference, I hear you ask? I am very glad that you asked, because I'm trying to figure that out myself. I got it, people. Okay, so in the modern game of tennis, topspin is a huge deal. Now, to generate topspin, in some way or another, you have to generate upwards force in your racket swing. So if you imagine with me that your racket created a perfect line like this, just going straight across your body, there'd be no possibility for topspin. It is I would say, like, for you math heads out there, if you picture the line that your racket follows, it is at the point of contact, the gradient of the arc, the percentage that is going up translated into topspin, and the percentage that it goes across translates into force, strength, all that good stuff. So if theoretically you had like a racket that went just directly up like this, you would generate a lot of spin, but very little force. Yeah. What am I getting at here? I'm getting at the fact that different grips around the racket will change which muscles are responsible for moving the racket head in a different direction. So, the most notable, I think, the most notable thing that people often talk about is how, with an extreme grip, your flexor muscles on this side of your forearm that sort of are responsible for doing this, those muscles are now responsible for moving the racket head upwards in the air, like so. And these muscles, traditionally, are very strong. Well, traditionally they're stronger than your, I guess these are extensor muscles or something, to extend the wrist. So flex wrist, extend wrist. Or wait, maybe it's, yeah. Anyway, anyways, so these, if you think, for example, that's actually why pull-ups tend to be, or one of the reasons pull-ups tend to be easier for beginners, is that a big part of the pull-up movement is not only the flexion of your elbow, but also the flexion here. You can imagine if you were here in a pull-up, right? And you could flex a little bit, that would actually put your chin a bit higher above the bar. And by contrast, usually our extensors are weak. So it's much harder for us, if we're like this in the pull-up, to then flex this joint to get higher. It's because of the weakness of those muscles. So in the modern game of tennis, one of the advantages of this grip is to generate more spin. Mind you, you have this is a bit of a narrow way of thinking, though, I would say, because if you think of the likes of Jack Sock, Nick Kyrgios, they have the ability to generate a lot of spin, but they also have the ability to generate a ton of force, because you can still apply this how to say it, I don't think that this factor that I've just explained is as prominent as a lot of people would have you believe. I do believe that you can generate a lot of topspin using traditional grips, but the grips do just sort of change the feel and might bias certain aspects of the game. For example, Tsitsipas can generate a lot of spin, but I think that He has quite a conservative grip, by the way, but to my eyes at least, and so does Medvedev. Tsitsipas can generate a ton of spin, but he seems to default to hitting a bit flatter than other players might. And Medvedev also has quite a conservative grip, I believe, and he actually does hit the ball much flatter than pretty much any player of his caliber. Another slightly older example would be Delpo, who has a conservative grip, and he predominantly hits very low topspin shots, very power biased, right? And actually, an interesting. So I'm sort of going off on tangents here, but when I talked about the line, right? If you go completely straight, there's no possibility of topspin. Del Potro has a pretty linear swing where it's a consistent gradient that goes up in a line. So it's very power biased because the gradient is not that steep, and it's also the type of gradient is a pretty much a line. Or the curve does not steeply increase. I believe the curve probably still does increase because I think biomechanically it probably has to. But it's a smaller feature of his swing. Whereas if you take a very opposite, Nadal, if you look at the line of his swing, the curve is like an exponential curve, kind of, I guess. I think I'm thinking about it a bit wrong. But if you take the, I forget if it's the derivative or I think it's the derivative. Yeah, if you take the derivative, I think that his gradient has a steeper rate of increase. That's what I'm trying to say. His gradient has a steeper rate of increase, which means that within the one stroke, it starts off with a very small gradient, very flat gradient, and throughout his swing path, it very rapidly increases to the point where it very quickly gets it pretty much going just up. What that means though is, yo! Okay, thanks! So what that means is that Nadal tends to hit the ball with extremely high topspin. But one interesting fact is he can generate mad amounts of pace, and you'll see him do that often when he catches the ball really, really early in his swing. So I think it's like he almost catches the ball back here, and that's when his racket hasn't started that exponential curve yet. And just a little bit later in the swing, and there's already a lot of topspin, and a bit later again, then there's a ton of topspin on his strokes. So that's an example of how players like Nadal actually do have the full range of spin and not spin, and how they can find that range. They can find the range by just changing the swing path, or they can find that difference by catching the ball at a different moment of their swing path. Interesting stuff. Anyway, I've just been called down to dinner by my parents. But there's one thing I wanted to share with you, which is I'm thinking that this is kind of what I want to make possibly the biggest feature of my game, as I try to improve. Thinking about that conservative grip, it's basically pretty natural for it to like send the ball really, if you face the court, it's very natural, even if you don't face the court. To me, it's extremely natural to find very extreme angles and basically hit the ball effortlessly with a topspin shot into the server's box at like an insane angle, you know, winner type shots that you don't see very often. And I feel like there's an opportunity to be exploited where by having a slightly unconventional, well now unconventional grip, conservative grip, I can actually send the by having the racket in front of me, send the ball really sharp angles cross court. Yeah, and one thing I'll say about sharp angles as well, it is very possible for people with extreme grips to also get sharp angles. It's a bit of a finesse business though. It can be a bit tricky. Nick Kyrgios does an amazing job of this. And it's part of how it's done. I think one of the ways that can help achieve it, well, partly hitting it further behind you, whereas with a conservative grip, you can still get that angle by going further in front of you, and also by going more over the head, so you can still hit it. So actually, that allows you to hit a bit more in front of you. So Kyrgios does that, and also it kind of feels like hitting it a bit further back here, and it sort of finds the angle, hitting it a bit more on the inside of the racket. And Kyrgios has a pretty extreme grip. Although, another point I'd like to make is that actually most players vary their grip a bit. They have a bit of a range. So Kyrgios actually, I think, ranges from semi-western all the way to very extreme. That's my reading on his shot. Because you can leverage the strengths of even just a small range to produce different kinds of shots. There we go. I think that's about good for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed it, leave me a like. It would, I'd enjoy that. And have a wonderful day.